Well, good morning again, everyone.
Good morning.
We're in a crisis. Now, it's a good thing I can't see your faces, because I can imagine that they have a look on them as if to say, yeah, well, tell me something I don't know. But the crisis I'm talking about isn't just the intense trouble and danger presented by the coronavirus. We're in that kind of crisis for sure. The kind of crisis I'm talking about is the kind that stems from the original meaning of the word crisis. You see, our word crisis comes from the Greek word krisis, which means a moment of judgment, as in the judgment of a court. And it later came to mean a condemnation or a punishment. And believe it or not, we're in that kind of crisis as well. Today we hear the story of the man born blind. Despite its length, it's a pretty simple story. Jesus heals a man of his blindness. And that stirs up a series of controversies in which various characters debate what, in fact, actually happened, and who, in fact, this Jesus is. So, for example, after the man recovers his sight, his neighbors debate whether he really is the man who used to be blind, or whether he's someone who just looks like him. Later, the debate shifts as to whether Jesus, who healed the man on the Sabbath, was a man from God, or simply a sinful man. Then folks haul in the man's parents to determine whether he really had been born blind, as though the healing wouldn't have been all that big a deal if the man had become blind later in life and then just recovered his sight. And finally, the argument returns to whether both Jesus and the man born blind are sinners, resulting of the man being thrown out of everyone's company. It's interesting to note that St. John, who has written this story, fashions it as though it were a courtroom scene. There is a debate over what really happened, who this man born blind was, and who this person Jesus, who supposedly healed him, was. Witnesses are called in, the man himself, his neighbors, his parents, the Pharisees, and then a judgment needs to be rendered, a moment of crisis. And that crisis occurs in the final scene between Jesus and the man born blind. At the end of the passage at verse 35, St. John tells us, when Jesus heard that they had thrown the man out, he found him and said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered and said, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, the one with whom you are speaking." He said, "I do believe, Lord," and he worshiped him. And so, you see, we're all tempted to say, that's it. The judgment is rendered. The debate over who Jesus was is over, and the man born blind got the judgment right. But that's not really the verdict in this case. You see, after the man believes in Jesus as the Son of Man, Jesus then says to him at verse 39, I came into this world for judgment. And the word Jesus uses in Greek at that point is crisis. I came into this world for crisis, so that those who see do not see, so that those who do not see might see, and those who do see might become blind. You see, for Jesus, the judgment isn't about him. The judgment is about the ones debating who Jesus is. St. John doesn't believe that Jesus came into the world to judge us. St. John believes that Jesus came into the world for us to decide who he is. And in making that decision, Jesus doesn't judge us. We judge ourselves. So that those who are open-minded and realize that they don't know everything are the ones able to believe in Jesus as the Messiah. They're the ones who are blind at first and then see. While those who think they know it all, those who aren't interested in considering what God might be up to in Jesus Christ, they're the ones who think they see, but who are really made blind by Jesus. Hence his words, I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see might see, and those who do see might become blind. This is the crisis in the story of the man born blind. When we confront the very mystery of what God is doing among us, we face a crisis. We have to choose what we believe. And in that choice, in that crisis, Jesus doesn't judge us. We bring judgment upon ourselves. So you see, that's why I say that we are in a crisis today. The last week has been crazy for all of us, including all of us here at the parish. First, the governor limited the gathering of crowds to 250 people. And then the archbishop prohibited us from canceling any masses that had fewer than 250 people coming to them. So last Saturday, we had our afternoon mass. But soon afterwards, the archbishop canceled all public masses until further notice. Then we were permitted to do funerals, so long as they did not exceed 250 people. So we were able to get through Bobby Young's funeral on Monday. But then the governor limited the size of gatherings to 50 people. That meant we had to close the doors for Beatrice Christian's funeral after 50 people arrived. And we had to turn everyone else away. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. We're not in the business of turning people away from church, especially not when they're grieving the loss of a loved one. Then both the governor and the archbishop limited groups to 10 people. And we have been essentially shut down on campus here ever since. For Nathaniel James, Ronnie James's husband, who passed away last week, everything has to be private for his funeral because his immediate family is larger than 10 people. As the coronavirus takes its toll on our state, our nation, and our world, we are making judgments left and right. Some are making judgments about the president and our governor. And the president and the governor are making judgments about those who are judging them. Some are judging the archbishop, saying that if he were truly a man of faith, he would defy the governor and allow people to attend Mass because God would take care of all of us. And some have even judged me, thinking that I should defy the Archbishop. It's a crisis because, like all the characters in the gospel story today, we're all debating what's going on and we're putting each other on trial. And we're all making judgments about each other. But like the story of the man born blind, the crisis today is not about the judgments we're making about one another. The crisis is about the judgment we're bringing upon ourselves. You see, throughout all that is happening with this virus, we are all called to consider what God might be up to in the events of today. And no, I don't mean whether God is sending this virus as some sort of punishment or wake-up call. I'll leave that nonsense to those on the far right. I believe that in the midst of this virus, no matter how it came to be, God is calling us to identify the presence of Jesus Christ in our midst and to believe in Him. To believe that if Jesus can heal a man born blind, then He can bring us through this virus. As we witness an increasing number of people falling victim to the disease, God is calling us through Jesus Christ to show our love for them by assuring them as much care as humanly possible. As people suffer the financial hardship of schools and businesses and even churches closing, God is calling us through Jesus Christ to support them as best we can. And as we continue to live in a society in which we are all in this together, God is calling us through Jesus Christ to renounce our selfishness and to engage each other in responsible and respectful ways. God is first and foremost calling us to respond to the coronavirus as people of faith. That means praying for those affected by the virus, as well as praying for ourselves, as we scramble for new ways, even these electronic ways, to pray together in an environment that keeps us separated. Our campus might be shut down because of the 10-person rule, but our ability to pray with and for one another can never be shut down. And it also means that we have to be serving those in need, especially our older members. And I'm delighted to say that our 30 to 49ers, who we've been focusing all Lenten season, has stepped up and is starting now to call all of our members who are age 80 or older to see how they are and to see what help they might need. And the Knights of Columbus is offering to run errands for them, for the grocery store or the drugstore or something that they might need help in that way. And we're making every effort to keep our food pantry open so that we can continue to serve and feed people at this time. And responding in faith also means to respond in love when our nerves are frazzled, in creativity when our typical ways of doing things aren't available, and in openness to the possibility that maybe we don't have to do all the things we've always been doing. It means believing that through it all, God is accompanying us. God is guiding us. And God is making a way for us when we find it hard to see a way for ourselves. Jesus came into the world for judgment, so that those who do not see might see, and those who do see might become blind. If we think we already know it all, and that we alone have all the right answers, then we are blind to what God might be up to in this time of coronavirus. But if we acknowledge that God is God of heaven and earth, that God and God alone knows and understands what really is happening, and that we must allow God to take the lead in this one. Then, and only then, might we truly see what is happening all around us. The crisis of the coronavirus is not simply about the danger presented to us by an ever-growing pandemic. The crisis of the coronavirus is not simply about what our political and religious leaders are doing in light of it. The crisis of the coronavirus is also about the choices we are making in response to it. Because a crisis is not just a dangerous event. It's also the judgment we bring upon ourselves in responding to it. Amen.
Amen.